This new Titan Melee Glaive build dominates. Now wait a sec, let me rewind. So a while back I made a melee build where you could insta-kill multiple champions at once with a melee slam, and insta-kill champions that you didn't even stun. So today, this is a recreation of that build but updated with the new mods and seasonal meta for season 19. Now we're not going to be using the god rule glaives, debuffs on enemies and all that stuff. Although it's strongly recommended, it's not required. It'll just make the build significantly better, but the way we have this build set up, you'll be using the same build but for multiple things. You're going to have a high damaging melee slam that in most cases insta-kills champions or gets them close to death. You're going to be literally invincible using glaives, which also outputs insane DPS that can melt bosses quickly, if you're properly buffed out that is. You're going to have an on-demand restoration, infinite melees, increased weapon DPS, and overall you can just call yourself a true sun god. Now there's quite a lot to this build and we will look at the damage output soon too. So stay tuned, hit the thumbs up if you like this one, and subscribe for more like this, because I do make them quite often. And now without further delay, let's start slamming. Now firstly, as always, like every build video, if you do like this one and you want to see more like this, then you can find the full collection of builds in the playlist, which is linked down below, along with our Discord server. But with this one today, you will be able to tank a stupid amount of damage, have insane DPS with melees and glaives, and overall dominate endgame PvE. And by the way, there is a few different variants of this build, and by that I mean you can use the same initial design, but with a few different mods to suit your playstyle. And we will go through that very soon, but to get started, let's quickly check out the glaive damage. So our normal glaive attack here is hitting 16,144 damage, pretty low in basic, which is going to do nothing. Throw in a Synthoceps, you're going to hit 48,432 while surrounded by enemies. Okay, so now we're getting there. Now make yourself radiant, which you'll have all the time. You'll start hitting 60,540. Now bear in mind that a sword, using the lament for example, is only going to hit just under 22,000 damage with a light attack, which uses heavy ammo. Now you compare that with a glaive attack that uses no ammo, so yeah, you can see where this is going. Now you can take this a step further by using a solar operative and hit the glaive while radiant, which will cause just under 70,000 damage. Which still isn't anything because you can actually throw on a glaive boss mod, have a new damage perk that can roll on a new solar glaive this season, and have a weakening debuff on the enemy using something like a tractor cannon. Guys, I'm not even kidding. If you max out all these buffs and stack them all together, you can hit around 150,000 damage per second. And come on guys, this is with a glaive that doesn't even use ammo. Now with this build, we're not going to go for the max DPS route because there are some complications with maintaining the damage stacks, which can get a little overwhelming. So the way we'll have this build set up, we'll have a backup DPS option if things go bad, but as we go through that setup I will tell you guys what things you want to run if you want to max out DPS instead of going this route. But there are quite a few fun things you can actually do with this build. So a quick example of the ways you can use this build. Firstly, you can just run around spamming your hammer. This will spawn solar wells, give you radiant, restoration, and a decent amount of damage as it is. The only downside to this is that you don't have much protection and you gotta chase after that hammer. If you lose that hammer, it's over. A normal punch ain't gonna do it. Now you will always have a healing grenade if things go bad and you need to back away. That is your safety option for all variants of this build. But the second way you can use the build is to use your glaive. Use your hammer first to become radiant, spawn solar wells and get restoration, and then go around with your glaive killing everything, and guarding for when you need that protection. This is probably the best way to use the build because we'll get the new passive aggressive guard artifact mod to resist all incoming damage. But if you can resist it without it, by means go ahead because you can use the solar operative, which will be able to boost that damage even more. And if you're running in a team, use the other one, but it's more complicated to use, so honestly I'll just stick with the two that we have here, which I'll show later in the setup anyway. But the last way to use the build is to just use your slam, slide melee, jump melee, and this in most cases will either insta-kill champions and some bosses, or make them finishable. And if you're using a Lucent finisher, all good, right? Free heavy ammo. Not that we need it the way this build is, but you get the point. Now I will go over the full setup in a second, but if you want to go the DPS route and have max possible damage with a glaive, then you'll want to run the new glaive this season with the close to melee perk that will increase the glaive's damage. You want to run a tractor cannon to debuff enemies for more damage, your Ember of Torches fragment to become radiant for your buff, a Synthoceps for increased damage while surrounded, all of which stack together. And then lastly, either a solar operative if playing solo for the 15% buff, or the monochromatic for the 10% if playing in a team. But personally I'd go with passive aggressive guard for more survivability, because the amount of damage you have already is more than enough. You can use a Font of Might too, but this will only work for the actual projectiles and not the melee attack, so just be aware of that. However, for my setup, I'm going with a new glaive, but with the most overrated mod in the game, which will actually work with Soul Invictus to spawn sunspots on ignition kills, which is good because that will give us restoration every now and again. But I am also using a Lament sword with the Font of Might, and although the glaive will do more DPS, the sword is our backup because if there's only a boss or champion left and no ads around for Synthoceps to kick in, then the glaive is pretty much pointless and you're going to be sitting there all day hitting that boss because the DPS is going to be pretty pointless. So it's always good to have a backup DPS option, which in my case is going to be the Lament sword. Now for the base setup that you're going to want to use regardless of how you intend to use the build is firstly run the Titan Solar Sunbreaker subclass with the Hammer of Soul super ability. You'll then want a Rally Barricade, although it actually doesn't really matter. A Throwing Hammer, you 100% want this one on, as this will give you Radiant all the time and spawn in those sunspots. And then you also want a Healing Grenade for the times where you're close to death. Aspects are going to be Soul Invictus, Solar Ability Final Blows create sunspots, and those sunspots will apply Scorch to enemies who pass through and give us restoration times 1. We also have the Consecration for the Melee Slam, which does a lot of damage. Now if you don't care about that melee, then you can just throw on a Roaring Flames to stack up the ability damage, but that's up to you. It's down to personal preference. For the fragments we have Ember of Eruption, your solar ignitions have increased AoE, Ember of Benevolence, applying Restoration, Cure or Radiant, which will do all the time, will grant us increased grenade, melee and class ability regen for a short duration. We also have Ember of Torches, powered melee attacks make us and allies radiant, and then lastly Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants us melee energy. This is for when we actually use the ability slam, so if you're using Roaring Flames then you don't need this one on. The exotic we're using is going to be the Synthoceps. I'll explain this in a second, but your alternative is Wormgod Caress. Both will work with the glaive, but this one will be harder to keep active, so we're going to go with Synthoceps. Increased melee lunge range, improved melee and super damage while you're surrounded. This works with glaives too, which is the best part about the build, and it's required if you want to max out your DPS to make glaives worth using in endgame PvE for a damage choice, so make sure you have this on. Now for the mods, I'll start in a helmet as always, so we have Font of Might. This is to increase our DPS for solar weapons, that being our Solar Glaive and our Lament sword when picking up solar wells. We got a Harmonic Siphon to spawn in orbs on rapid kills, and then our heavy weapons ammo finder mod. For the arms, we have Radiant Light for the extra strength stat, which means we need to use the momentum transfer, which is going to be no use to us, so ignore that. And then we have our champion mod that we need. In the chest, you want your melee wellmaker to spawn in solar wells on melee kills, which will be from your regular hammer, then your damage resist mods. Legs, we have elemental ornaments for extra solar wells, a better already for health regen on orb pickup, and our ammo scavenger mod. Then lastly for the class, you have a few options. The one I'm going with is firstly Well of Life. I'd keep that on regardless. Then a passive aggressive guard to receive less damage from enemies while wielding a glaive and being near enemies. If you can survive without it, use a solo operative if playing solo for extra damage, or a monochromatic for when playing in a team. But this one will be harder and more annoying to achieve and keep consistent, so I'd personally just stick with the passive guard one. The other mods don't really matter, so you can use what you want. You can even take out Well of Life if you want and use a Lucent finisher, totally up to you, but for the stats, you want to invest in 100 resilience, 100 discipline, and 100 strength as your triple 100 ability build. Honestly guys, this build is kinda crazy right now. It's unlikely they'll nerf this for the rest of the season, but you really never know. So if you want a really good build right now to complete challenging activities in the game and melt things down quickly while tanking a crap ton of incoming damage, then this is the build for you and definitely worth using. So guys, that there is your new Titan Melee and Glaive DPS build in Destiny 2 Witch Queen Season of the Seraph. Next, as always, remember to check out the playlist down below for more new fun and updated builds like this for this season, for Season 19, as I do cover them every week here on the channel, and you guys might just find your new best build. But for now, as always, take care and stay tuned for the next build video, and I'll see you then. Peace out guys.